Yes, indeed. We are back with another great show, another great guest on the one and only The Sick Podcast Steeler Crazy. I am Jay York Football. He's back from Vegas with the Steelers victory, and it's looking like a quarterback change this upcoming week. Mr. Mic'd Up Sports One, or you still have that Vegas hangover?
A little bit. I mean, it lessens the hangover whenever you get a dub. What a awesome game to be at. I think the last few Steelers games I went to, I took home L's. The Dolphins, South Florida
Yeah, I
here a
remember
couple
that
years
one.
ago, Sunday night game, and so it felt good. You don't want to travel all that way for a tough loss. In the first half, things weren't so promising, but the defense really stepped up, and I thought Najee Harris had his best game as a pro. So it was cool to witness that in person. And man, what we're going to witness in person this Sunday is I don't know if the word cool is appropriate just yet, but it's going to be interesting watching Russell Wilson's first start in the black and gold, JY.
I'm excited, and I want to feel like I manifested this because everyone jumped on me on Twitter when I was posting the pictures and said it's time. But I think Mike Tomlin agrees it's time to see what we have in Russell Wilson. And with that being said, I know you used your Manta sleep mask when you took that flight to Vegas. So let's
No
just
doubt.
shout out to our sponsors over at Manta Sleep, the only mask designed and optimized for the deepest sleep possible in any environment, 100% blackout. Absolute comfort. You can put the J York football stamp, the Mic'd Up Sports One stamp on it. Be sure to use our code 6Steelers for 10% off. They're right here. They're light. You can travel with them. I go to bed early. I always tell you guys it's helped me get a restful night of sleep for a few months now, and I'm going to continue to use it. So use our code 6Steelers for 10% off at checkout and get some quality sleep. And next, we have another great partnership. Mike, why don't you talk about it? And you know, we're always giving our picks and making you guys putting some money in your pocket with DraftKings.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what's interesting? You mentioned I was in Vegas. I was at the casinos. Everybody, was familiar with the old school way. You get a betting ticket, you go up to the cashier at the register, and you either, obviously cash that in or take your loss. But now it's digitized. It makes everything so much easier. So I was out there using DraftKings Sportsbook app, which was just so convenient, whether you call it a TD, a tutty, hitting pay dirt. It does not matter. You can bet touchdowns at DraftKings Sportsbook. Tell you what, very interesting line this weekend. The Jets are favored coming into Pittsburgh this Sunday night. Remember, just a couple weeks back, the Steelers lost to the Cowboys on Sunday night. So that of course is something that I didn't necessarily expect, given the fact that the Jets are sitting at 2-4, but their motivation is going to be high. I think it's a make or break game for them. Make sure you download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now so you can bet on that game. Use our code SICK Sports. New customers get 200, yes, that's 200 big ones in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas. 21 and over. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/ftball.
There you have it. And we have a great guest lined up today. So, Shane, let's get to it.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. Steelers Crazy.
Harris Smith shields. Blackout. Polamalu takes it home. Super Bowl 43. Pittsburgh might be bound for that thanks to number 43.
The sickest Pittsburgh Steelers podcast. Sports entertainment like no other. It's gonna be sick.
All right, our guest today provides a ton of advanced statistic fantasy content to the table. Just an all around, I should say, overall NFL expert. We're excited to bring him on. It is John Daigle. You can find him at establishthorun.com and not J Daigle on X. So is this actually John Daigle?
This is Actually, John Daigle. Not Jay Daigle, but John Daigle. Yes.
Not Jay Daigle on X once more. And dude, we're really excited to have you. I mentioned the site established a run, and the Steelers were able to establish a run this past Sunday against the Las Vegas Raiders. I mentioned Najee Harris in the open. Looked like he had his best game. Talk to me about his value moving forward with Russell Wilson now being the starting quarterback.
It's obviously going to open things up more for rushing attempts, since Justin Fields was previously stealing a top 6 amount of carries per game as a quarterback. The issue for Najee Harris is that although the performance was encouraging, you also have to zoom out and realize it was against the Raiders, who are making business decisions out there when it comes to tackling. Look at the last 2 weeks beyond Najee Harris too. Jerome Ford, who a lot of people have different opinions about, but goes over 80 yards from scrimmage. Javonte Williams, who is probably going to get benched this evening and had already been benched prior in the first month of the season for Tyler Bidet, who then unfortunately suffered a neck injury on injured reserve for the Broncos the rest of the year. But even Javonte Williams had over 100 yards from scrimmage against the Raiders too. So I don't think it's too shocking to see anyone do anything against the Raiders this year. What's concerning for me, at least for fantasy, for season-long stuff, when we look at who's going to step up in their backfield, is that it has still been a timeshare. And the 2 games where Jaylen Warren has been at full strength and played to the end of the contest. And in those 2 games, Najee Harris has only handled 55% and 58% of Pittsburgh's backfield touches. So basically a 60-40 time split. So as the more explosive option, I don't know how it shakes out in the immediate future, but I would imagine that they still want to continue involving Warren and increasing his workload more and more as the season goes along.
Have to transition to the big news of the week, at least in the 412 land in Western Pennsylvania. And that is most likely, we haven't found out definitively yet, but it feels like 99% around here, Russell Wilson's taking first team reps. Been some reports that he is the starter, and we thought at some point that would happen. I want to talk a little bit about realistic expectations for Russ. And here's a question that I want to pose to you. You know, I'm in a ton of fantasy leagues. I study this stuff as well. Russ, currently a free agent. He's not rosterable in a lot of these leagues. Is that more to do with the Steelers' offense and potential lack of weapons, or just the fact that Russ is not great right now?
There are a lot of caveats to quarterbacks and fantasy leagues. And one quarterback leagues, even, for instance, Patrick Mahomes is droppable because I don't know if y'all have realized this, but Mahomes hasn't been a top 12 quarterback in 10 consecutive games going back to last year. You can actually just stream Geno Smith. In some one quarterback leagues, Baker Mayfield is available, and Mayfield's been a top 7 option every week except against the Broncos, who no one gets there against, except for maybe tonight. No Pat Surtain. That matters immensely. But in one quarterback leagues, you could pretty much stream whoever. I do not suggest streaming Russell Wilson, regardless of what we think about his long-term value this weekend against the Jets, who are still allowing the third fewest plays or third fewest yards per play in the NFL. But I do have some hope, some wish casting for at least the team's pass catching options. It was very encouraging to see George Pickens last week, a couple weeks ago, gets called out by Mike Tomlin, and rightfully so, for lazily going through his routes and basically complaining like a child whenever the ball wasn't going to come to him in that play. You're still supposed to sell it as a professional and pretend as if the ball is called your way, but he was not doing that correctly, gets called out, goes right back to being an every down receiver last week. Obviously heard the responses around him, and then leads the team with 8 targets. The good thing is, though, like unlike Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, for all his flaws the past couple of years with Denver, like at least was still a very good deep ball thrower. That's what he did throughout his career in Seattle too, was drop the ball on a dime, 50 yards downfield. And like last year, he threw 20 yards downfield at the 8th highest rate in the league for 6 touchdowns, 1 pick, a 38% completion rate. Doesn't sound promising, I know, but remember that these shots downfield are all coin toss throws that then come down to contested catch situations. And just look at the talent that he had in Denver, that they have right now, actually. And it's obviously harder to get by. And he also suffered 3 drops on those throws 20 yards deep last year. So I am encouraged because George Pickens is a guy where as long as it's in his radius, he's going to come down with the ball. Not only that, but we just saw Roman Wilson activated from injured reserve. Like everyone, brought along slowly. It's probably going to be another month and a half until we see Roman Wilson and 2 wide sets at full strength. But it's not as if Van Jefferson has also done anything to hold Roman Wilson off for the last couple months of the season. So as the better receiving prospects.
And I forget he's on the team sometimes still,
Yeah,
to be honest with
exactly. And he's playing every route. Like, you wouldn't even notice. And the one game he wasn't in there where he suffered that eye injury in the first half, Calvin Austin steps in and he immediately has a 40-yard touchdown that week in the second half. It's like, we could put anyone here and they could probably do a better job. He's just one of those guys, though, that never goes away because he does like all the things on the field correctly, except produce for fantasy for us. So I expect Roman Wilson to come on strong in about a month and a half, and that's going to open it up from a deep passing quarterback like Russell Wilson even more.
Yeah. So let's talk about another wide receiver that was a, hot ticket item, wanted to come to Pittsburgh. Not really sure what happened, but reunited with Aaron Rodgers. Obviously, we play the Jets. Davante Adams. Do you think that he can have an impact right away? And how do you see him faring against the Steelers defense on Sunday night?
I do think he can have an impact right away. Unlike Amari Cooper, who I still think if you have him in fantasy, you should be very high on. Sometimes it's, we have the advanced stats. Everyone's aware of what's going on. But sometimes you just step back and say, hey, Amari Cooper's playing with Josh Allen. Like, that's all you need to do. I don't even need to do my job beyond that. But for Davante Adams, it's similar. Last 2 years, we saw him with Aaron Rodgers, the wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 6 and points per game. It's absolutely, despite what everyone's trying to spin it off as, it's always a negative when a wide receiver is just going to see fewer raw targets. And that's what's happening with Garrett Wilson too, because Davante Adams is going to come in. It's not Nathaniel Hackett anymore. I understand that calling plays. I don't think it's too much of a variation, though, under Todd Downing's playbook. So I bet he's an 80 to 90% snaps kind of guy, Davante Adams, on Sunday night, and he's just going to step back in and do his thing. Even last year from Aiden O'Connell, averaged 10.8 targets per game because targets are earned, and Adams is still one of the very best at earning those targets. So hopefully the Steelers have a plan to stop him. I'm not sure about their defensive game plan in this one. They're still blitzing at a league low rate. I wish they would factor that in more, even though I do understand logically why they don't, because when you have like the defensive player of the year in TJ Watt, who's just a man on a mission, you don't really have to send extra defenders. You just use him and then hopefully stand back and cover deep plays. I know they've struggled with that at times this year, but we'll see how they fare against Aaron Rodgers. But I do expect Davante Adams to just get dropped in and do his thing.
Yeah. So let's talk about Steelers wide receiver George Pickens. I think I say this on every single podcast and I tweet it every single week. We're still waiting for that George Pickens breakout game. This is hypothetically speaking, if Russell Wilson is the quarterback behind center moving forward, at least, Sunday. Do you think that, this will help him immensely? And do you think that he can kind of find his rhythm? We know the talent's there, but, stats wise, it just, he doesn't even have a touchdown this season yet.
And yes, he doesn't have a touchdown, but we've all watched the games. Like, we see how much he's getting bailed out just because he's been so good in drawing DPIs downfield. He's had a couple negated touchdowns for dumb penalties that shouldn't have been called, motions beyond this before the snap, things like that. So I still have all the faith in the world. And also, like, whenever you are a receiver, what we look for in fantasy is a guy who can earn 28%, 30% of the team's targets and get downfield shots be used, because otherwise your Wan'Dale Robinson, Jackson Smith and Jigba, your ceiling only goes so high because all you're doing is being peppered close to the line of scrimmage. George Pickens is in an opposite universe of that. Like, he still has a 12.5-yard depth of target, getting downfield shots with no one competing for his targets either. It's the perfect situation. And so now if we think we're going to get more raw pass attempts, which I believe we will, and more accurate downfield shots, it can't be spun as anything but a positive for Pickens moving forward. So yes, I think the touchdowns are coming just strictly based on the volume. And I do still love the situation for Pickens as a player you can buy low on because, as you mentioned, no touchdowns yet, but I bet those come to fruition based on that volume.
We sure hope so over in Steelerland. I have one more before I throw it over to Mike, and we kind of, talked about it earlier, but what do you expect when Jaylen Warren does get healthy, which it seems like we're here. What do you expect from him the rest of this season?
It's going to depend on how much they alleviate the touches from Najee Harris. Does it eventually become a true 50-50 split, or is Najee still in a 60-40, 70-30 situation? Because last year, Warren showed that he's incredible when you get him the ball. Like, look at any advanced metric, success rate, which weighs like how many yards a running back gets on first down to make life easier in the NFL on second and third down for his offense. Top 10 in his success rate running the ball, top 10 in yards per carry as well. Just look at anything, and Warren is popped in every stat you can imagine. But I will say, at least under Arthur Smith, I do still have a little bit of faith, maybe that he can't overtake the backfield altogether, because we already talked about guys not doing anything wrong, like Van Jefferson. Devin Singletary comes to mind. Dave Montgomery kind of hung around in his career for this reason and has now exploded with Detroit. Najee Harris is also a guy who's not doing anything wrong. He's just not as explosive as Warren. That's it. And so you just try to really mix it up in a thunder and lightning approach, especially in 2024 football. But for Arthur Smith, we at least saw as talented as Bijan Robinson, Cordero Patterson, Tyler Algier are. In 3 seasons with Atlanta, those running backs under Arthur Smith averaged over 5 yards per carry against 8-man boxes, because Arthur Smith is also an amazing play caller who schemes up a terrific run game. So even if it is just splitting the touches between Najee and Warren, I still think Warren can hopefully get there as a top 50 player in fantasy rest of season with elite contingency stash value if Harris were ever injured down the stretch.
Yeah. We're hanging out with John Daigle. He's big time over Establish the
Not big time.
Run. Come on, man. You're big time. You're a humble guy.
I appreciate the compliment.
Sure. You're a humble guy. No question about that. And let's cast a wider net for some of our fantasy nerds or just individuals who need some advice this week. Want to talk a little bit about some waiver wire fire. Hit me with some guys that should be ads this week.
Let's go to, there are a couple important ones, and I think the replacement running backs come to mind the quickest, and that's honestly what the waiver wire has been this year. Outside of Jordan Mason, there's only been a couple of guys that maybe you could argue should have gotten 60+% of your free agency budget, and we'll see what happens. But if Jordan Mason's out, Isaac Garindo, we saw how explosive he is, was one of the top 5 most athletic running backs to test at the combine in the last 2 decades. The dude ran a 4.3 40 at 221 pounds. The Chiefs are one of the toughest matchups in football against the run. But if Garindo's under center, we just kind of close our eyes and trust Kyle Shanahan to figure it out. Kind of like the Jets being a tough run defense, but Jordan Mason in week 1, everyone remembers 147 yards and a touchdown in prime time. Ty Chandler is another one where, yes, it is a very tough matchup against Detroit's front 7. In fact, Detroit has only allowed 2 running backs to reach 80 rushing yards in their last 25 games. Christian McCaffrey in the conference championship, and then superhero Ken Walker, the game everyone remembers on Monday Night Football earlier this year, where he also scored 3 touchdowns. Otherwise, you ain't running on Detroit. But if Ty Chandler, a very explosive and athletic running back, is going to be an every touch option without Aaron Jones as well, just something to keep in mind, since when Aaron Jones got injured in London, Ty Chandler handles 85% of the running back touches the rest of the way. But I do think the 2 you can plug in immediately, regardless of what happens in front of them this week. 1, Christian Watson, and the Green Bay Packers wide receiver game has been just amazingly fun this year, because it's been impossible to figure out which one is actually going to hit. Even this past game, Romeo Doubs, 2 touchdowns, but also was his lowest target share, 12.9%, and 3 starts with Jordan Love this year. So he's really just remains a touchdown or bust option that's hard to trust. Whereas Christian Watson, we at least saw, was quite literally a top 16 receiver when he was fully healthy last year. He has obviously dealt with injury issues throughout his entire career, which is why he's been limited this season. But over the last 3 quarters, once Dontavian Wicks got injured against the Cardinals last week, Watson only ran 1 fewer route than Doubs and was still targeted on 22% of his routes, compared to Doubs being targeted on 16% of his routes. So I think Watson is the better ceiling option this week against Houston than Doubs. And then my other favorite option you can plug in immediately is Demario Douglas for the Patriots. For one, Drake May brings life to the Patriots offense. Not only that, but think about what this Jaguars defense has allowed this year. Every quarterback they've faced so far through 6 games, and that includes Deshaun Watson, have all finished as QB1s. Drake May is going to absolutely compete to do that this week, and his favorite target was very clearly Demario Douglas, which makes sense because go back to North Carolina when Drake May was starting since 2022, and remember, Josh Downs led the team with 100 targets from the slot in 2022. Brian Nesbitt and Nate McCollum in 2023 combined for 120 targets from the slot. Demario Douglas led the Patriots in slot routes. That just seems to be where May prefers to throw the ball. And so against this injury-riddled, terrible Jag secondary, I think Douglas and May are both amazing pickups ahead of week 7.
Love it. I didn't think we were getting a Brian Nesbitt and Nate McCollum shot on the show today, but heck,
There we are.
We'll take it. I might have botched those names anyway, but I like me some Pop Douglas. So rock with that, everybody out there for sure. Go ahead, JY.
Yeah, before we get you out of here, tell everyone where they can find you. I know I listen to the podcast and follow your content, so really fortunate to have you on the show. But just tell everyone where they can find you, and just want to this is my last question. Do you think that this Steelers team can win the AFC North?
So let's start with the Steelers question, because the Bengals are one of those teams that it's not showing in their results right now, even just getting by this past primetime week against the Giants. But when you look at yards per play, EPA per play, all the advanced offensive stats, what's really happening is that their offense has been incredible, especially since T. Higgins came back the last few games. And it's their defense that's really struggling. Although their run defense, I know Tyrone Tracy was very explosive. That's Tyrone Tracy's profile, by the way. Only played running back the last 2 years. He converted from wide receiver his final year at Purdue, but he's just been shot out of a cannon these last 2 seasons at running back. But the Bengals defense is still shored up their running game for the most part. It's just their secondary that's just injured, even benching Cam Taylor-Britt at times, who's supposed to be one of their top secondary players. And so we'll see if they figure that out. And that's kind of my concern right now, is that it's not just the Ravens who have every defense in a blender. And right now, I don't know how you stop a Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson RPO game, because you have to pick your poison. And every time you pick the wrong one, it's game over. The other one's just gone to the other side of the field. So I still think it's the Ravens, ultimately. Lamar Jackson trending towards MVP. But can the Steelers sneak in and beat Joe Burrow, who they played tough the last couple of years? That's kind of the question, right? Can the Steelers sneak into the wild card? And at least we know right now, the AFC East in particular is one that's really struggling to get a second team in there. And so I do think the Steelers are going to be keep competing for one of those final 2 spots. I can't guarantee they'll slip in, but I know the formula is correct in having a pass rush and now hopefully some added explosiveness through the air with Russell Wilson starting moving forward. And then
South too, right? Unless you trust the Colts, I would say that's the South too.
And you can't trust the Colts. And I would love to say I trust CJ Stroud, who's still incredible. For instance, the Texans, because of Bobby Slowick, who I still think is the most overrated offensive coordinator in the league right now. He's doing the same thing that Zach Taylor did with Joe Burrow, where Zach Taylor is not a good head coach. He makes some good GM decisions, but as an actual head coach and decision-making, very bad at it. But it doesn't matter when you draft an all-world quarterback all because you were bad, and then you get the elite quarterback. When you find an elite quarterback, he solves all problems. For instance, the Texans, people don't realize they're 31st in yards to go on third down because all Bobby Slowick does is run the ball on first and second and set CJ Stroud up to fail. Here's the thing. CJ Stroud can't fail because he's so damn good at football. So it just makes Slowick look better every week, and it's frustrating. Again, same thing for Taylor with Joe Burrow, who just makes Taylor look good. And what I was going to say beyond that, though, is just get some plugs out of the way. If you want all the free stuff, establishtherun.com and the Establish the Run podcast, where I do the waiver wire for everyone on Tuesday afternoon, plus rest of season 150. That's always a big table discussion between my friends and our other employees, Mark Dankenbring, Jack Miller, Adam Levitan, since we all put effort into the rest of season rankings. And then we also do DFS over there as well if you're into the DraftKings stuff. So yes, establishtherun.com for everything football.
Sounds good. Well, hey, we really appreciate having you on here. We'll definitely have to do it again. Keep up the great content. And man, I'm about to. That's what I was looking at because I actually
right now.
Yeah, I when you were saying them names, and a few of them to pick up, but there was some guys, and I'm actually starting Drake May because I had Dak Prescott. He's on a bye this week, so I'm looking for.
Don't drop Dak Prescott. I know everybody wants to. It's been frustrating the last couple of games, but the Cowboys' schedule opens up over the next 5 weeks where they have to be a pass-heavy team. So do not drop Dak, but yes, pick up May to start in his place this week.
Sounds good. Well, hey, we really appreciate it. Keep up the great stuff, and we'll definitely keep in touch.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John.
And good luck to the Steelers this week. Big game. Big fight feels.
Big time.
Do it.
No doubt. Yeah, I mean, it really is. To go to 5-2 and essentially knock the Jets out, I think. I mean, 2-5 is freaking hard to recover from. Is just an absolutely critical game. I'll throw it out there first. I think the Steelers are going to lose the football game.
Dang,
I think
we're on the
Jets,
Steelers crazy podcast.
I know, man, but I have to, like you said, be objective sometimes. I think the Jets with Davante Adams now, I mean, they add literally a top 5 receiver in the NFL overnight who's been studying the Jets playbook for probably 3 weeks anyway, because he's been checked out in Vegas, and his old coordinator anyway, Nathaniel Hackett, will be there, so he doesn't have to pick up on much. Their receiver corps now is Adams, and Garrett Wilson is arguably the best in the NFL. So Steelers will have to contend with that. They know they're in do or die mode. They know it, just like the Cowboys did 2 weeks ago when they came in 1-2. Obviously it was still early, but they felt like it couldn't fall to 1-3. And this is the best defense the Steelers will face all year. On top of the fact that Russell Wilson is going to be rusty naturally. He is. He just hasn't played football in, 8 months, right? When's the last time he actually took the field as a starting quarterback? So I don't love the Steelers' outlook right now. They can keep it close, I think, like they did Dallas 2 Sunday nights ago, but I'm nervous for all of those reasons.
Yeah, and I still think just riding with Russ moving forward, even, obviously if he goes out there and it's just not good, then, you have to turn back to Fields. But I just, 2-3 game sample size, see where it's at, kind of let him get his feet wet. And then you can kind of go back to the drawing board. I think I say this again. I know it's like beating a dead horse at this point, but you kind of want to find out right now, do the Steelers have your QB of the future? If Russ does come out and shows flashes, of the Seattle Seahawks, Russ, I think that with a good offensive line, he can play another 4 or 5 years. Maybe I'm being a little bit too optimistic, but I just want to see. I think that I don't want to say this is like a QB experiment. No one wants to have that, but I think it's a good problem to have. And I'm excited to see as a fan, and just covering the Steelers as me and you do. I think it's exciting either way, just to kind of, see what we have and get some wins. We're still 4-2. So I
heard that argument, and I totally get it. Like, I don't know if the Steelers are going to win a Super Bowl with Justin Fields.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's possible, but if you get an excellent Russell Wilson, I think there's a higher percentage chance.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think you can get a Russell Wilson who's getting sacked often, who is, not able to make plays with his legs like Fields was. And, in that case, maybe the team starts to turn a little bit on just the coaches as well, because they were 4-2 with Fields, and the offense scored 28 against the Colts, 32 against the Raiders. We haven't seen those numbers since Big Ben and AB and Lev. So, yeah, man. So we'll see. Like you said, I think he's going to get 3 or 4 games minimum, and I'd be surprised if the Steelers end up going back to Fields at all this year, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I agree. Well, as always, it's been a great show. Appreciate everyone hanging out with us. Make sure you subscribe. Use our code for Manta Sleep, DraftKings.
6 Sports.
I'm rocking the Homage shirt right now. Link down below, as well as the Homage hat. And yeah, we're just going to be cranking it out. We have Deshaun Elliott on, Christian Kuntz. We have some of the top analysts in the game, from fantasy to, you name it, Sirius XM. So we're just going to keep giving you guys, the best Steeler content that we can. And we do this for yins. So appreciate you guys. J York Football, Mic'd Up Sports 1. Shane, take it to the tunnel.
That's right.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Steelers Crazy on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.